Tevan leaned close, his voice barely cutting through the laughter and clinking glasses of my 70th birthday party. Your silence is worth millions. I froze. My son-in-law's smile was sharp, confident, the smile of a man who knew he'd already won. He raised his glass. Congratulations, sir, but sometimes, living too long means seeing things you weren't supposed to see. No one else at the table noticed. My daughter Emily kept her uneasy smile, her eyes flickering away from mine. Behind us, a tribute video played on the big screen, something his company had prepared. But all I could see was my name, erased from the list of the Foundation's original founders. I once believed Stephen was a good man. I thought my daughter's happiness was worth more than my doubts. But those words, so casual, so cruel, cut through the last strand of trust I had left. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper of ice. Don't say a word. You can buy your peace, or bury it forever. The noise of the room faded, the music, the laughter, all distant. Only the pounding of my heart remained, heavy, furious, and awake, because in that moment I understood. My silence was protecting a criminal, and what happened next was far worse than any threat he could make. Stay till the end, to see how one old man brought down an empire built on lies with nothing but the truth. I was born in southern Indiana, in a creaky wooden house by a river that froze solid every winter. My father was a carpenter, my mother taught Sunday school. We had nothing, except calloused hands and the faith that honesty would always be rewarded. I grew up on dinners of dry bread and bone broth, but there was laughter in that house. Maybe that's why I never understood people who tried to buy happiness. I studied accounting, then joined a small local charity, the Hearthline Foundation. It didn't make me rich, but it made me proud. Every number I wrote meant a child went to school, a mother got medicine for her son. That's where I met the love of my life, Margaret. She taught me that integrity is the only wealth no one can steal. When cancer took her away, I promised I'd raise our daughter Emily to be good, not successful, just good. Emily grew up like her mother, gentle, hard-working, believing that kindness always wins. She used to sit in my office coloring quietly, asking, "Dad, do grown-ups ever lie?" I smiled, brushing her hair back. "Of course they do, but I hope you'll never have to lie to be loved." When she was 26, she brought Stephen home. Tall, charming, sharp-eyed, he spoke like someone used to winning. He talked about startups, million-dollar deals, and this new idea of smart charity. It sounded strange, but magnetic. That night, he told me, "Your generation has heart. Mine has tools. Together we can change the world." And just like that, I let the devil into my house, smiling. After the wedding, Stephen moved Emily into a mansion in the suburbs. I stayed behind in my old home, content with my small garden and weekend visits. But soon, those visits grew fewer. Emily avoided eye contact, saying Stephen's work was sensitive, that he was doing great things for the community. Then one evening, I saw him on the news, shaking hands with the governor, smiling beneath a new banner, Silver Horizon, where kindness meets capital, and beneath it, the Hearthline logo, my logo, modified, claimed. My hand trembled around the remote, and for the first time I heard Margaret's voice echo in my head. "Norman, people change when they touch money, or when they lose love." I didn't know it yet, but both were about to happen. At first, Emily still called. Her voice grew more distant with every conversation. Forced laughter, rushed goodbyes. "I have to join Stephen's meeting," she'd say. One fall evening I went to visit unannounced. The guard hesitated, then said softly, "Mr. Norman, Mr. Stephen doesn't allow visitors without notice." I smiled politely, swallowing the sting. Something cracked quietly inside me. When I finally saw Emily, she looked pale, tired. There were faint red marks on her wrist, like bruises. I asked, she just whispered, "I'm fine, Dad. Just tired." But her eyes weren't fine. I started digging into Stephen's company. Behind the label of a private philanthropic corporation, he'd built a web of shell charities, moving money in ways that didn't add up. The numbers on public reports didn't match what I knew. One night, I visited Silver Horizon's website. They showed photos of rescued children, kids I recognized. They were from our old Hearthline campaigns, edited and rebranded. I confronted Emily. She stayed quiet for a long time, then said softly, "Dad, he's helping people. Just in his own way." Her voice shook, like someone trying to convince herself. Then came the envelope. No return address. Inside, a financial report showing over $7 million funneled through dummy corporations. And at the bottom, Stephen's digital signature. Someone inside wanted me to know. That night, I drove to Emily's house. The door was open. Voices echoed from inside, sharp, angry. You lied to me. You promised my father. Shut up. You think that old man understands this world? I stepped in. Stephen turned, cold fury on his face. You shouldn't have come here, Norman. His voice was a blade. Emily begged me to leave. I did, but I saw something in his eyes that chilled me to my core. Power without conscience. On the drive home, Margaret's words returned again. Sometimes you must choose between keeping your home safe and keeping your soul clean. I knew what I had to choose, and I knew, from that night on, silence had a price. 3 weeks after that argument, sleep stopped coming. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Stephen shout, "That old man doesn't understand this world." Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't understand a place where kindness is priced and truth is defined by contracts. One morning I went back to the old Hearthline office. They'd swapped the sign, but my filing cabinet was still shoved into a storage corner. I opened it, dust coating the ledgers I'd handwritten, signatures trembling from years ago, each one a promise. I took everything home and started matching it against Silver Horizon's public records. On the surface, everything looked flawless. Audits, big-name sponsors, clean reports. But numbers don't lie. People do. I spotted the first thing, identical expenditures showing up twice, listed under different funds. It's a ledger duplicating trick only someone who's done accounting would notice. Add them up, and nearly $3.8 million had been reallocated in a single quarter. I printed everything, clipped it into a thick file, and put it in my old leather briefcase. The next day I walked into Silver Horizon. The young receptionist blinked. "Mr. Norman, I thought you were retired." I smiled. "I am. But today I wanted to say hello to my successor." Stephen appeared, honeyed grin on his face. "What a surprise. Is something wrong?" "A few numbers don't match. I wanted to ask if it's a system error." I held up the file. His eyes flashed. Then he smiled and laid a hand on my shoulder. "Sometimes accounting doesn't show the real business. I'll have it checked." Soft words, and a cold blade underneath. That night someone forced my front door. Nothing was taken, except the briefcase. I understood then this wasn't suspicion anymore. It was war. The police took a report and shrugged. No signs of theft. They didn't know my briefcase held the first proofs that Stephen was more than greedy. He was a man twisting the system in the name of charity. I started backing everything up. For 3 nights I scanned every file to a hidden hard drive. I bought a tiny camera and sewed it into a button on my coat, just in case. Not for revenge, out of fear. I was afraid the truth would be buried with me if I disappeared. Then a text came from an unknown number. "You're going too far, Norman. Stay quiet, or prepare to lose more than data." I sat down hard. Cold sweat ran down my back. Stephen wouldn't stop. And I, a man who'd believed in justice my whole life, had to learn how to fight in the shadows. 2 days after that threat, Stephen showed up at my house. No warning, no smile, just that hard, unreadable look. "We need to talk, Father," he said. I opened the door and tried for calm. "About what?" "About the files you accidentally copied." He stepped inside and set down a new leather briefcase. The same make as mine. He slid a white envelope across the table. $2 million, a legal wire transfer. You sign this non-disclosure, forget those old accounting games. "And if I don't sign?" I asked. His face changed from smooth to brazen. "Then you become a data thief. Trust me, police believe the rich, not the old." He nodded at the paper. "Non-disclosure agreement, my name, and a blank for a witness, Emily." "Does my daughter know?" I asked. He smiled. "She thinks you're confused, that you're imagining conspiracies. Age plays tricks, right?" The words shattered me. I'd taught my daughter honor my whole life, and now they used my age to discredit me. Slowly I pushed the envelope back. "No amount of money buys my silence," he chuckled. "It's a shame. You taught me truth has no price. You'll learn it does, and it's very expensive." He left. His silver car disappeared down the street. I felt like I'd just signed my own sentence. That night, my mailbox had been rifled through. My computer had spyware. I wiped it, changed passwords, uploaded every file to an external drive, but unease sat heavy. Stephen had wealth, influence, power. I had the truth, and an old heart. 2 days later, the papers ran with it. Former Hearthline accountant suspected of leaking internal documents. My name, my address. The headlines felt like knives. Emily came by, eyes swollen. Dad, he said if you just sign, it will all end. Why do you make everything worse? You don't understand, Emily. He's using you, using everyone's trust. No, he saved thousands of people. You're ruining it. The door slammed. Snow began to fall outside. Stephen's line echoed in my head. Your silence is worth millions. For the first time, I was truly afraid. Not of him, of being alone. That night, I replayed the security footage I'd secretly installed at Silver Horizon before they'd kicked me out. There he was, on the phone with a partner. If he talks, I'll bury him with fake evidence. Trust me, that old man won't survive a scandal. My hands shook as I stopped the playback. There was no turning back. I had to expose the truth, before they silenced me. 4 days after that confrontation, my face was everywhere. Former accountant embezzled charity funds. Elderly man sabotages Silver Horizon. The internet spat out cruel captions. A father who can't accept the new generation. Neighbors avoided my gaze. Church acquaintances turned away. Reporters called relentlessly. Former friends asked, "Did you steal from the orphan fund?" I didn't answer. I stared at the pile of documents and thought about irony. I'd spent my life keeping the books straight. And now numbers were burying me. Then a call from an unknown number. A woman's voice, low and cautious. Mr. Norman? I'm Lisa. I used to be a junior accountant at Silver Horizon. I know you're telling the truth. My chest went cold. Do you have proof? I asked. I do. But they watch me. I have a money laundering contract, signed by Stephen, routed through a Cayman company. If you go public, I'll hand it over. Hope flickered. We met at the old parking lot by Franklin Bridge. Once a night market, now a handful of dim lights. She arrived hooded, carrying a folder. They think I don't keep paper copies, she said. I made USBs. Be careful, Mr. Norman. They won't let you live if you expose them. I opened the folder. Offshore transfers, confirming stamps, bank routing numbers. It was brutal and beautiful in its clarity. Thank you, Lisa. You saved the truth. She gave a thin smile. I just want to sleep. Then she melted into the fog. I copied everything onto 3 hard drives and hid them in 3 places. The old church, a retired lawyer I trusted, and one I carried with me. The next morning, an envelope waited on my doorstep. No return address. Inside, a folded note. Lisa had an accident last night. Car exploded. Don't try to be a hero. My hands went numb. In that moment, I knew this wasn't just about money. He was protecting a lie with a ruthlessness I had never imagined. The TV flashed breaking news. Former Silver Horizon employee killed in car explosion, a grainy photo of Lisa in smoke. My hands tightened around the paper. Grief and rage rose together. He'd crossed a line that kills people. I looked at Margaret's photo on the wall and whispered, "They've killed someone, Em. I can't stay silent." I decided to go public. Not through press releases or the police. Those channels were bought. I would pick a moment no one could cut. The memorial for my old colleague, the founder of Hearthline. The whole town would be there. Stephen would be there. I had nothing left to lose. This time, he would lose everything. The memorial morning was raw and cold. Wind cut at your face. St. Mary's Church wore its black ribbons like grief made visible. I put on my gray suit and fixed my tie with shaking hands. The mirror showed a man altered, not broken, but resolute. Someone who'd lived too long protecting a lie. Stephen arrived arm in arm with Emily, flawless as ever, handshakes, smiles, the practiced ease of a man used to being loved by the room. When our eyes met, he nodded, the nod of a man confident his opponent was finished. "What are you doing here, Father?" he murmured close enough that only I heard. "To say thank you," I replied. "You taught me silence has a price." The service began. People sang hymns. The organizer invited Stephen to speak as the CEO of Silver Horizon, the supposed steward of Hearthline's legacy. He mounted the podium and spoke of transparency and compassion with the smooth certitude of a polished politician. When he said transparency, I pressed the small remote in my pocket. The big screen behind him flickered and then played the footage I'd kept secret. His voice echoed, then the clip. Your silence is worth millions. Don't make me prove how much I can take from you. The room froze. Stephen's face went blank, then furious. Turn that off, he barked, but the video kept rolling. This time it was the phone recording, him telling a partner, if he talks, I'll bury him with fake evidence. That old man won't survive a scandal. Murmurs swelled into a roar. Phones came up. Reporters in the back stood, Emily's face drained of color. I walked to the podium, my voice rough but steady. This is the truth. This is the man you trusted. I stayed silent to protect my daughter, but truth cannot be buried with an old man. Stephen lunged for the microphone. Don't believe him. He fabricated. A sudden commotion. The mic fell, a small pop of chaos. Security moved in. Eyes turned to him, the man who'd just snapped in a house of worship. I saw Emily fold into herself, crying. I sat beside her and put a hand on her shoulder. You don't owe me apology. I was blind once, too. They hauled Stephen away amid shouts and flashing cameras. Outside, sirens began wailing. The files I'd carried were no longer trapped in drawers. The truth was streaming out into the world. As I stepped out into the gray sky, Margaret's voice seemed to hover behind me. You chose right, Norman. Silence is no longer a sin. I knew that was only the beginning. The legal battles, the media storms, the fight for justice, those were coming, and they would be hard. But the fear that had lived in me had gone, because once the truth is spoken, it doesn't die. 3 days after the memorial, Stephen was on every morning show. He wasn't the stunned man from the church anymore. He was calm, in a crisp white shirt, voice warm for the cameras. I love my father-in-law, he said, but he's struggling with age-related paranoia. Those videos were edited, fabricated by someone who was asked to resign for accounting errors. Reporters pressed him. He just smiled. I won't sue him. I want him to get help. Family is where forgiveness lives. It landed like a killing blow. Within hours, the media split. One camp praised Stephen as gracious and compassionate. The other wondered if I was chasing relevance after failure. Comments flooded every feed. He's just a jealous old man. Who believes a 70-year-old knows anything about deepfakes? Stephen's too kind. Hope Mr. Norman gets therapy. I read them all. Each line was a pin in the heart. Emily cut off contact. Old friends from the foundation kept their distance. I'd guarded my name my entire life. Now it was being crushed by the very goodness I used to believe in. That evening, a knock on the door. Father Raymond from St. Mary's, the priest who'd watched everything at the memorial. He looked at me, soft but certain. Norman, I know you didn't do this out of revenge. I saw his face when the video played. That wasn't a man being framed. That was guilt tearing through a mask. I asked, but the world out there doesn't believe it, Father. It's all right. God doesn't need a crowd to believe. He needs one person to do the right thing. His words were a sliver of light through the chokehold of night. I chose not to hide. I would face the press. The next morning I walked into the local station and asked for a live segment. The young producer gave a practiced smirk. Mr. Norman, this isn't a venue for revenge. What do you have besides feelings? I met her eyes. Feelings change. Evidence doesn't. I handed her a USB, full, uncut recordings with timestamps and digital signatures. She frowned, checked them on a workstation, and her face shifted. If this is real, you're sitting on a media bomb. No, I'm sitting on the truth. 3 hours later, they called. Primetime live. I knew Stephen would be watching, and I knew he wouldn't let me finish. The studio lights burned so bright I could barely see the audience. My heart hammered, but Father Raymond's voice held steady in my head. You don't need the crowd, just the courage to do right. The host gave a tight intro, then waved me on. Tonight we're with Mr. Norman, the man accused of fabricating videos to smear his son-in-law, businessman Stephen Hale. I looked straight into the lens. I didn't fabricate anything. I aired what others tried to bury. I stayed silent too long, and that silence nearly killed me. The host tilted her head. Mr. Hale says the footage is edited. Do you have proof otherwise? I held up the USB. This is the original, untouched, with timestamps and encryption verification. If you want, I can play it here, now. The room went still. Then the studio lights flickered, control room chatter. The host pressed a finger to her earpiece. Mr. Norman, Stephen Hale is on the line. He'd like to join us live. Of course, He wouldn't let me breathe. His face filled the monitor, poised, serene, the smile of a man auditioning for sainthood. Dad, please stop. I know you're hurting, but this isn't the way. I just want you to rest, not be used by people with an agenda. The host jumped in. Mr. Hale, you're saying all the videos and documents are fake? I am. There are forces against Silver Horizon. They're exploiting a grieving old man to bring us down. His voice poured like honey. Live comments scrolled across the screen. Stephen is unshakable. That poor old guy got played. I looked back into the camera, lowered my voice. Stephen, you're right about one thing. I'm old. But I remember every word you whispered at my birthday. Your silence is worth millions. Do you remember? He flinched, half a second, barely there. The lens caught all of it. I went on, blade steady. You say I'm being used. Then who emailed the Cayman bank director to open Horizon Future Looted? Whose digital signature is this? I held up a printout. The camera zoomed. S. Hale filled the screen. Silence swallowed the set. The host stammered. Mr. Hale, your response? His face lost a shade. He tried to smile, but his lips trembled. I don't recall. Someone might have spoofed my account. Like the way you spoofed the trust of your own family? I cut in. A low roar rippled through the studio. The host realized she couldn't cut to commercial with millions watching. Online, the tide flipped in seconds. If it's fake, why are there timestamps and bank codes? The old man's got real receipts. Look at Stephen's eyes. He's rattled. Stephen inhaled sharply, fighting for calm. You don't understand. This is bigger. There are people behind. There's no one behind this anymore, Stephen. Only the truth standing in front of you. I rose and faced the lens. I don't need everyone to believe me tonight. I need the world to remember that sometimes the quietest person is holding the loudest secret. The host said nothing. The screen went black. In that beat of darkness, I knew the public scale had tipped. For the first time, Stephen cracked. The interview ended at 9:00 p.m. By 9:17, the internet detonated. The real Hale hit the top of the trends in minutes. The clip of Stephen freezing at the sight of his own signature splintered into 1,000 reposts. Headlines hammered in. New evidence in Silver Horizon scandal. Did Stephen Hale defraud a charity? Smear campaign or whistleblower? The father-in-law fights back. Reaction split. Half hailed me as a brave whistleblower, half warned, don't trust everything, money buys truth and lies alike. But anyone who looked into Stephen's eyes in that clip knew he was afraid. And when men like him fear, the walls of deception start to crack. Messages poured in. Strangers thanked me for speaking. Former Silver Horizon staff sent anonymous notes saying they'd been forced to file fake reports. A few politicians quietly backed out of partnerships with his firm. I thought I could finally breathe. That first win lasted until morning. I stepped outside and a black sedan idled across the street. The window slid down. Emily. Her face was drawn, eyes bruised by a sleepless night. Dad, I need to talk. About Stephen? About everything. We sat in the car wordless for a while. She set her phone on the console, screen full of Stephen's messages from the early hours, accusations, threats, pleas, all tangled together. He says, if I believe you, he'll burn it all down. But if you're wrong, he'll sue both of us. I took her hand, voice shaking but sure. You don't have to choose a person. You have to choose what's right. Tears spilled. She folded into my shoulder. Dad, now I see it. His eyes go dark when he talks about money. I thought I could save him. I smoothed her hair, saying nothing. I knew that ache, watching the person you love turn into someone else. That afternoon I went to St. Mary's to see Father Raymond. He was waiting with a thick envelope. Norman, someone asked me to pass this on. No name. Inside, a photo of me and Emily in the car that morning. On the back, a scrawl. You think the crowd will shield you forever? I looked up. The priest's eyes were heavy with worry. There's no stepping back now, Norman. When he can't win with words, he'll use fear. I'm not afraid for me. I'm afraid for my daughter. Then hold fast to your faith because his counterattack is coming. His words rang like a warning bell. Near dusk, the news broke. Stephen had hired a powerhouse legal team and filed a countersuit for defamation, claiming malicious damage to a businessman's reputation. Behind him stood a line of politicians who'd taken Silver Horizon money, now publicly endorsing him. On camera, he declared, "I will defend my name, my family, and my organization to the very end." I turned off the TV. The room fell silent. Outside, the sunset bled red, like a wound that wouldn't close. Inside, I knew. This fight wasn't about money anymore. It was about a soul. And the real counterattack would begin in court. The news hit like a storm. The bank froze my accounts. Temporary hold pending investigation related to alleged data fraud. The post office delivered papers. My house was now disputed property under provisional lien. In 48 hours, Stephen had bent the system with lawyers and money. On TV, he stood calm beside a wall of gray suits, speaking into a thicket of microphones. "We respect the law, but reputation can't be slandered without consequence. A father-in-law confusing love with hatred deserves help, not credibility." Cold words, sharp as a blade. People started to doubt. Some even showed up outside my home to shoot video, posting it with captions, "The old liar used to live here." One night I walked to St. Mary's, the only place that still felt quiet. I knelt in the dim nave, hands trembling. "God, if I'm wrong, take this memory from me. But if I'm right, give me one more person who believes." The answer came in the strangest way. The next morning, a knock. A woman around 50, thin, hollow-eyed, stood on my porch with a folder in her arms. "Are you Norman?" "I am." "I'm Rebecca Kane. I used to be in-house counsel for Silver Horizon." I braced. "And you're here to defend them?" She shook her head. "No, I'm here to make amends." She opened her case and slid out a contract stamped with Silver Horizon's seal, 2018. I signed paperwork that laundered funds. When I realized it was fake, Stephen threatened my son and forced my silence. I quit, but I never forgot. I stared, hardly breathing. "Why help me now?" "Because you spoke when the rest of us were afraid." We sat at my kitchen table in a cone of pale light. Rebecca laid it out. Stephen used a shell in the Bahamas tied to a private European bank, funneled money through a Horizon Future fund, then bought insider stock, washing tens of millions clean. If you can prove he did that under a nonprofit's name, we can petition federal court to open an inquiry. "We?" I asked. She smiled. "I left the law in shame. This time I'm coming back. For justice." For the first time in weeks, hope brushed past me, but Rebecca warned me. "Stephen will know we're working together. He has people inside. Every step must be surgical. He won't just sue. He'll erase you." She was right. 2 days later, I was served. Stephen Hale v. Norman Ward, defamation, business interference, breach of confidentiality. Damages sought, $15 million. The number caught in my throat. I didn't have 10,000 to my name, but this wasn't a suit to win money. It was a muzzle. The days that followed were a silent sprint between truth and power. Rebecca and I worked in a dusty attic above St. St. Mary's, only wind and old wood for company. She opened encrypted files she'd saved from Silver Horizon's internal servers before she left. "Here's the hidden transfer chain, 3 layers of shells. If we identify the ultimate beneficiary, we can prove Stephen used charitable funds for personal stock plays." "How do we get the bank confirmations?" I asked. "Someone in finance owes me a favor. Trust me." We worked through the night. She traced transaction codes. I cross-checked with Hearthline's old ledgers. Each match eased a knot in my chest, like reclaiming a piece of dignity stolen from me. Stephen didn't sleep. By morning, the feeds exploded. Source: Norman Ward suffering age-related delusions under psychological observation. A crooked photo of me outside the courthouse was sliced into mocking frames. Comments piled up. "I used to believe him. Now I see why the son-in-law sued." "Grandpa thinks he's a hero. Yikes!" Emily called, panicked. "Dad, they posted your medical records. How did they get them?" "Money, sweetheart. Money buys silence and forges lies." He was doing exactly what he'd promised, burying me under fake evidence. That evening, Rebecca arrived tight-jawed. Problem: a key co-signer on my files, the witness we need, just withdrew their statement. $500,000 to forget. "Can you prove it?" "Yes, but if I speak, they'll turn on me." Stephen knows how to scare people. I touched the table, bone tired. Don't risk your life for me. I'm not doing it for you, she said softly. I'm doing it for myself. I signed those papers. I won't let them become his trophies. We dug back into an old hard drive. Buried inside hundreds of files, Rebecca found a hidden directory. Archive Silver Ghost. Inside, dozens of contracts bearing Stephen's e-signature, linked to Cayman account codes in his name. Oh my God, she breathed. He forgot to wipe the logs. This is primary evidence. My eyes stung. God heard. The relief lasted hours. When we stepped outside, a black SUV idled by the gate. Two men in suits approached, legal representatives for Silver Horizon. Mr. Ward, Ms. Kane, under temporary order, all case-related data will be seized to preserve the integrity of proceedings. Rebecca went white. They're fast, Stephen knows. He had a hand inside the courthouse. Every move we made, he tracked. As they boxed the laptops, Rebecca looked at me, the message clear. I nodded. The originals had already been sent, 30 minutes earlier, to the one person Stephen could never buy. The SUV pulled away with our computers and files. The room still smelled of exhaust, thick as the helplessness trying to close around my throat. Rebecca sank into a chair, hands to her temples. That's it, Norman. No evidence, no shot. They'll charge us for unlawful access. No, I said quietly. We still have a shot. You sent it, didn't you? Her eyes sparked. Yes. To the only man Stephen can't purchase, Samuel Blake. The name made me shiver. Years ago, Samuel had been the first federal financial inspector daring to probe Silver Horizon, until Stephen crushed him with a fabricated record scandal. Samuel lost his job, disappeared, forgotten. How did you find him? He's in Portland. I reached him through a network of former inspectors. When I said Stephen's name, he only said time to settle a debt. I didn't know whether to call it luck or fate. 3 days later, at the preliminary hearing, reporters clogged the hallway. Stephen swept in with a phalanx of lawyers, smiling like a man on a victory lap. Rebecca and I took our seats at the defense table. No counsel, no boxes of exhibits, just the belief that justice still had breath in it. The judge skimmed the complaint, eyes narrowing at us. Stephen rose, voice as polished as ever. The defendant intentionally defamed, disseminated fabricated data, and damaged the reputation of a charitable organization. We seek $15 million in damages. When he finished, Rebecca leaned toward me. Wait, I think Samuel's coming. Time seemed to stop. Then the courtroom doors opened. A gray-haired man in a dark coat walked in carrying a stack of files bound with a red tie. He strode to the bench and set them down. I'm Samuel Blake, former federal financial inspector. I have documents proving plaintiff Stephen Hale used a charitable foundation as cover for speculative trading and international tax evasion. These are originals obtained from Silver Horizon's servers with verified time-stamped encryption. The room erupted. Stephen blanched. His attorney shot up. Objection. Not on the evidence list. Inadmissible. The judge frowned. I'll decide after authentication. Bring them here. Samuel glanced my way and nodded. In that look I saw a life flattened for telling the truth, rising now to stand beside me. Stephen slipped. Who is he? A bitter has-been I fired? Back for revenge? The judge's gavel cracked. Order! Rebecca gripped my hand under the table. See it, Norman. The truth never disappears. It only waits for someone brave enough to call it by name. I looked at Stephen. The swagger was gone, replaced by a tremor at the corner of his mouth. Anger left me. Only a sorrow remained, for a man who'd sold his soul to money. When court recessed to review the files, Samuel came over and set a hand on my shoulder. He took my job, he said. You took back justice for both of us. I smiled. No, Mr. Blake, we're just reclaiming what belongs to everyone. The truth. Outside, rain hammered the steps, but inside, the sky began to clear. The legal counterstrike had only just begun, and this time, Stephen wasn't the hunter. He was the prey. 3 days after the hearing, a photo swept across social media, me, Rebecca, and Samuel standing in the rain outside the federal courthouse. The caption read, "An old man they tried to silence, now speaking for millions." That photo became an emblem. Word leaked that the court was investigating Stephen Hale for tax evasion and money laundering. The press shifted tone, from fawning to probing. Major outlets asked me on air. Front pages ran, "When Justice Wears a Father's Face." I never wanted to be a hero. I just wanted to be believed. But once the public wave rose, it wasn't mine anymore. It became a weapon, and everyone wanted to swing it. By the third morning, my lawn was packed. Reporters jostled forward, microphones aimed at my door. "Mr. Ward, should Stephen Hale resign? Are you afraid of retaliation? What do you say to people who once believed in Silver Horizon?" I kept it simple. I'm not asking anyone to hate. I'm asking everyone not to fear the truth. That night, the national network aired a special report. The anchor's voice rolled steady. Once dismissed as delusional, Norman Ward is now at the center of the decade's biggest charity scandal. Cut to Stephen leaving court, his face ashen under a crush of cameras. But the media's light doesn't just redeem, it burns. My phone wouldn't stop. Publishers, studios, investors, opportunists, everyone wanted to buy the rights to the story. Rebecca warned me, "Be careful. They'll monetize your truth before you can protect it." I turned them all down, but the internet had already created a different Norman, an untiring, always right, always winning hero. That wasn't me. I was just an old man losing sleep. One night, after lights out, an anonymous call came. A rough male voice, bitter and cold. "You think the crowd will love you forever? Wait, Norman. The crowd has no memory, only a thirst for blood." I didn't know if it was Stephen or a hired vulture. Either way, it chilled me. When justice rides on public opinion, one misstep and it turns like a pack of wolves. By morning, a new headline screamed, "Was Norman Ward fired from Hearthline for financial misconduct?" The piece cited an anonymous source, Stephen's fingerprints all over it. Within hours, the web split again. "Where there's smoke." "Or just another setup?" Rebecca fumed. "He's running the old play. Kill the witness's credibility." I gave a tired smile. "He's thrashing in the mud." "That means he's sinking." In the middle of that noise, one person came to me, the young reporter who'd doubted me before. Her name was Maya Torres. She'd interviewed Stephen many times back when he was philanthropy's golden boy. "Mr. Ward," she said, "I thought you were making it up. But after reviewing Samuel's files, I was wrong. I want to expose everything, with evidence, not just stories." I studied her, clear eyes, steady spine. She reminded me of Emily, once upon a time. "Will you see it through?" I asked. "If you still dare, so do I." And with that, the fight shifted to a new front, the media. What I didn't know. For every truth we revealed, a fresh lie waited around the corner. Maya Torres wasn't just a reporter. She was a flame in this long night. She came by every evening, recorder in hand, eyes bright, pressing for details. Dates, hours, signatures, every conversation, every person who'd appeared, vanished, or fallen silent. She spoke quickly, as if pausing might let the truth slip into the world's static. "I want to do this the right way," Maya said. "Facts over frenzy, evidence over outrage." I gave her full access to the mirrored data Rebecca and Samuel had secured. For days, she camped in the church office, eyes glued to a screen while lines of banking metadata scrolled past like code rain. One night she burst in, breathless. "I found it, Norman. Horizon Future Looted isn't just a shell. It's the gateway to at least 8 shadow funds across Europe, all ultimately owned by one person, Stephen Hale. He used them to buy property in Paris, Lisbon, Zurich, and New York." She laid a color map on the table, red threads running from Silver Horizon to points of light across the world. Every line was a scar of guilt. I stared, gooseflesh rising, so many scholarships and relief projects, just moral paint over bottomless greed. "We should go public now," I said. "No. If we jump early, he denies and scrubs the trail. I need time to verify source of funds." I nodded. Stephen, of course, wouldn't give us time. 2 days later, Maya received an unmarked envelope. Inside was a photo of her sitting with me at the church, and a note in red ink. "Don't be a hero. Heroes die early." She went pale, then managed a dry smile. "If they're tailing me, we're close." That night, as she drove off, a car with no plates followed. I watched from the window, heart clamped, reaching for my phone, then losing her in the dark. Morning brought a text. "I'm okay. He's got someone inside the newsroom. I'll work remote. Hold steady, Norman." The media tide shifted. Independent outlets ran investigations citing internal sources. Silver Horizon was laundering money through international charity networks. Cable shows launched Who's Really Behind Stephen Hale segments, turning him from darling to suspect. Online, the wind reversed. People who'd called me delusional wrote, "We trusted the wrong man. Restore Norman Ward's name." But the spotlight made my hands shake. Praise is a weather vane. It spins too fast. I knew one misplaced word could bring the house down again. I went to St. Mary's. Father Raymond looked up from his Bible. "Aren't you glad, Norman? They finally believe you." "Father, I'm afraid." "They believe today. Tomorrow they'll forget. I want justice, not a parade." "Then keep your heart clean," he said, "because when the light burns too bright, it burns the one holding the lamp." The words settled, heavy and true. The next day, Maya sent a voice memo. Small, steady, determined. "I have the final piece. Financial audio confirming Stephen moved funds from a children's program into his personal account. I'll air it live tonight. If anything happens, keep going." I replayed it, throat tight. She was walking the blade I'd walked before, and I knew something was coming. That night, the country held its breath. The network announced, "Special report, the truth about Silver Horizon." I sat in my dim living room, heart pounding like a funeral drum. Rebecca clutched a worn Bible. Samuel stared unblinking at the blue glow. The screen filled with Maya, hair pulled back, voice steady, a shadow of fear in her eyes. "I'm Maya Torres. For 6 months I've investigated Silver Horizon's financial system. Tonight, I'll show what millions of dollars could not hide." Behind her, the wall lit up with account chains, transaction proofs, and finally the signature, S. Hale. She spoke slowly, each word clean. "This is evidence that Mr. Stephen Hale transferred $9.7 million from the Horizon Future Charity Fund into a personal account in Zurich using project IDs that match African relief initiatives." The studio went silent. Then the noise rose. Cameras swung to Silver Horizon's legal team, their faces blanched. Maya faced the lens again. "I don't speak for anyone, but I believe silence in the face of evil is also a sin. This story began with a father, Norman Ward, who said what no one wanted to hear." My throat closed. Rebecca nodded, eyes bright with tears. And then, mid-broadcast, the studio lights blew out. The screen flickered, signal breaking. A scream carried over the live feed. A tech shouted into a hot mic, "We're under attack. Kill the power." The last image was Maya at the control desk, gripping the mic, voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't kill the feed. The truth has to be heard." The screen went black. Silence swallowed the room. I hurled the remote. My heart thrashed in my chest. Rebecca whispered, shaking, "Dear God, Norman, if they—" "No," I said. She knew. Maya already sent the masters. By morning, the news was everywhere. Maya Torres had been assaulted after the broadcast, but survived. The entire report was mirrored to independent servers and was now in the hands of federal investigators. The country convulsed. Headlines cascaded. Silver Horizon, from humanitarian icon to money laundering front. Reporter attacked after exposing Stephen Hale. The slandered father, now a symbol of quiet justice. The fallout was instant. Partners fled. Banks froze assets. The glossy photos of Stephen smiling in pale suits were replaced by his hard face under the shadows of a holding cell. As for me, there was no joy, only a hollow ache. Maya lay in a hospital bed with head injuries. I visited. She looked up and gave a weak smile. "I promised, didn't I? I'd tell it all." I took her hand, tears sliding free. "You did what my generation didn't. You made the truth impossible to kill." Outside the ward, the sky was awash of gray. Church bells drifted from a distance, cold, clear, reminding me the fight wasn't finished. Federal prosecutors filed charges against Stephen Hale. Trial date, 1 month. This time, the truth wouldn't just be spoken, it would be entered into the record. The trial of Stephen Hale opened on a bone-dry December cold. The steps of the federal courthouse were packed. Reporters, supporters, the merely curious. On the scrolling marquee out front, a single line crawled by. "Silver Horizon Scandal, the verdict of truth." I stepped out of the car, wind cutting my skin, hand tightening around my old hat. Behind me, Rebecca steadied Maya, bandage still on her forehead, eyes hard as steel. Samuel walked beside us, clutching a briefcase. "You ready, Norman?" he murmured. "I'm never ready to watch a man get punished," I said, "but I am ready to hear the truth called by its name." Across the barricade, Stephen emerged from a luxury sedan, flanked by a wall of black-suited attorneys. Still handsome, still poised, but his smile no longer reached his eyes. "Stephen, do you plead guilty?" "Any words for Mr. Norman Ward?" He offered one line, short, cold, and venom-tipped. "I will never bow to a lie, especially when it wears the mask of justice." The crowd split, boos and cheers colliding. I only looked at him. Once we'd called each other family. Now there was an abyss no bridge could span. Inside, the air felt heavier. The gallery was crammed. Cameras were allowed. The proceedings would be broadcast nationwide. From the bench, Judge Eleanor Briggs, famous for her no-nonsense glare, spoke with crisp authority. "Today, the court will hear both sides. We begin with the plaintiff, Mr. Stephen Hale." Stephen rose, every button fastened, every gesture smooth, like a well-practiced politician. "Your Honor, I am the victim of a coordinated smear campaign. That man, Norman Ward, was once terminated from his previous organization for misconduct. He has conspired with disgruntled ex-employees to destroy my reputation and steal 10 years of sacrifice and service to humanitarian work." He paused, letting his stare slash past me. "I once called him father. Now I see only a jealous man who cannot stand another's success." I didn't react. But from the witness row, Maya's fingers curled white-knuckled, her lip bitten raw. The judge nodded toward our table. Rebecca stood, voice steady and low. "Your Honor, this is not a campaign. This is evidence." She handed up a binder, bank transfers, certifications from federal financial investigators. Judge Briggs turned each page slowly. The room shifted. Every gaze landed on Stephen. "Mr. Hale," she said, "if these are authenticated, you're facing federal charges of money laundering and fraud." He kept his composure, only a crease forming between his eyes. "Your Honor, those are fabricated. I've said it before. Someone inside wants me gone. They built an entire counterfeit pipeline to topple me." "Very well," the judge replied. "We'll hear from the witnesses." They called Maya. She stood and moved down the aisle, measured steps on wood, a soft echo. Light from the high windows caught her hair, turning her into something both fragile and unbreakable. "I'm Maya Torres, independent investigative journalist. I independently verified Silver Horizon's transactions through 2 international banking systems. They all point to the same ultimate beneficiary, Stephen Hale." A ripple of whispers washed over the room. She held up a small USB. "This is a recording of a call between Mr. Hale and a Zurich bank director confirming a $9.7 million transfer. I'm submitting it into evidence." Stephen snapped, voice serrated. "It's fake! You've been bought!" Maya met his eyes, a thin, tired smile. "If justice were for sale, Stephen, you'd have won already." The judge ordered the audio to be played. Stephen's voice filled the silent room, clear, cold. "Same transfer protocol. Don't put my name on it. Use the future fund." In that instant, everyone knew. The game was over. When the recording ended, the courtroom felt vacuumed of air. No one spoke. Only the judge's pen tapped lightly on the bench, measured, unhurried, like the clockwork of fate. Stephen sat frozen, then lurched to his feet. "I refuse this. They set me up. Who proves that audio is real?" His lawyer tried to pull him down. Stephen shook him off and turned on me, poison in his voice. "Feeling proud, Norman. You wanted me humiliated just to wash your own shame away. Without me, you and Emily would have been living on handouts. I gave you dignity. I gave your daughter a life you could never afford." Cameras strobed. The gallery roared. I stayed seated, eyes level. "Stephen," I said, measured and plain, "I never needed you to buy me dignity. You only ever bought other people's fear." "Not mine," he laughed, harsh, hollow. "Fear! You once begged on your knees at a hospital to save your wife because you couldn't pay. You think I don't know. You hate money, but you've lived by it your whole life." His words cut into a past I rarely touched. The room held its breath. I rose, palms on the table, voice trembling but sharp as glass. Yes, I begged. I begged to save the woman I loved, but I never used money to buy another person's soul. You did, Stephen. You kneel to the dollar and call it power. He stalled, eyes suddenly vacant, as if no one had ever spoken that truth to his face. I turned to the judge in the room. I don't want to win a case. I want the children and the poor who trusted Silver Horizon to know their money wasn't lost because of God's will, but because of man's greed. My voice broke at the end. Rebecca's hand settled on my shoulder. Maya bowed her head and tears spotted the papers in her lap. Silence. No shudders. Not even a cough. Then Stephen began to laugh, twisted and ragged. You love the victim role. Your whole life is tragedy because you chose to be a loser. You think a few bargain bin morals can change anything? I looked at him and answered softly, No, Stephen, I'm not trying to change you. I'm trying to make sure men like you don't get to do this again. Judge Briggs hammered the gavel 3 times. Order! The court will recess 15 minutes before verdict. Federal officers escorted Stephen toward a side hall. He looked back at me, eyes boiling with hate, and something like dread. You'll regret this, Norman. You destroyed everything. I shook my head. No, Stephen. I took off a mask you wore for too long. When he disappeared, I sat, my heart thudding. Father Raymond came forward and gripped my hand. You said what needed saying, Norman. Let justice do the rest. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind fluting through the high panes. For years I'd thought I was the one on trial. Today I understood. No one was. Only the truth was being brought into the light. 15 minutes crawled by like centuries. The doors opened. Everyone rose. Judge Briggs returned, face solemn, gaze like winter. She set a thick file on the bench and spoke into the stillness. After reviewing all evidence, recordings, and sworn testimony, this federal court finds Stephen Hale guilty of money laundering, financial fraud, and falsifying international charity reports. The room erupted. Flashbulbs detonated. Stephen stood petrified, eyes empty. Judge Briggs continued, each word a hammer. Sentence: 25 years in federal prison, without parole, forfeiture of all illicit assets, lifetime ban from any role in charitable or financial organizations. The gavel cracked. Stephen staggered as 2 federal officers approached. He tried to speak, only a rasp. I just wanted to be recognized. I didn't mean... No anger rose in me, only a strange, quiet pity. He turned. Our eyes met one last time. We were no longer enemies, just 2 people who had once called each other family, now divided by a border named Truth. Before they led him away, he whispered, broken. If I'd stayed quiet, maybe I'd still be loved. I answered softly, No, Stephen. If you'd known love, you wouldn't have needed silence. The steel door shut behind him. The hinge screeched, dry and final, punctuating the end of a kingdom built on lies. Reporters flooded the corridor. The public roared outside. I heard none of it. In the emptying room, only Maya, Rebecca, Samuel, and Emily remained. My daughter stood at the far end of the hall, eyes shining with tears. I went to her. She trembled. Dad, I'm sorry. I was blind for so long. I thought love meant trust. I didn't know trusting the wrong person could be a sin. I cupped her cheek, smiling gently. It's all right, sweetheart. We all misplace our trust once, as long as we choose the right thing after. We held each other in the long corridor while late sun poured through the stained glass, laying a ribbon of light across the wooden floor like a benediction. Behind us, I heard Maya whisper to Rebecca, That's the image I want to end on, the frame where justice and family stand together. Samuel's voice was warm. Not just a story, young lady. That's history. Judge Briggs stepped out and paused before me. Her eyes had softened after the hard edge of duty. Mr. Ward, thank you for refusing silence. Today, it wasn't just Silver Horizon on trial. It was our faith in justice. She glanced at Maya, then lifted her voice just enough for the few who remained to hear. Justice is not silent. It simply waits for the brave to speak. We stood still. I bowed my head. Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, God, that the truth finally found a voice. Outside, a light snow began to fall. Emily and I stepped into the evening without a word. Only the last wash of daylight lay across the steps, as if wiping away every trace of the darkness that had lived there. Behind us, church bells tolled 3 times, not to mark a sentence, but to announce the return of faith. The verdict landed, but its echo moved like an undertow, pulling in everything tied to Stephen and drowning the last pieces of Silver Horizon. Within 3 days, his offices were sealed. Those gleaming storefront windows that used to reflect the triumphant smile of a charity icon now showed nothing but black and yellow tape, quiet as a death notice. Staff filed in one by one, carrying empty boxes like pallbearers at their own funeral. Logos pried off walls, plaques unscrewed, glossy photos with politicians torn up and stuffed into trash bags. "We believed him," a receptionist whispered, as if the walls still had ears. "That's on us." At the same time, banks recalled credit lines, donors demanded clawbacks, and cities that had granted land for open house projects pulled permits overnight. A finance anchor read it like weather. Silver Horizon, market value from $480 million to zero in 72 hours. The empire that once felt harder than concrete turned out to be soap bubble, and the brightest rainbow pops fastest when touched. In federal prison, Stephen traded tailored suits for gray cotton. The hair was clipped. Shiny Oxfords replaced by cold plastic sandals. On his first night, he asked for a sheet of paper and a blunt pencil, scrawled a few lines, then ripped them up. Sentences that wouldn't form, shattering like glass in his head. Cell 3A faced a slab of cement yard. Under the greenish hum of a fluorescent bulb, Stephen sat, the light washing the hollows beneath his eyes. Where arrogance used to live, a late-arriving conscience tried to move in. A bunkmate asked what he'd done for a living. "I worked in charity," Stephen said. A dry laugh shot back. "The kind of charity that left us sleeping outside while you bought a place in Zurich?" At night, when the metal on metal stopped, he pressed his face into his hands and learned that silence doesn't have a price. It has weight. He remembered the church and the big screen and his own voice. "Your silence is worth millions." In the thick dark, the line returned but altered. "Your silence cost you everything." His name became daily rations for the public. Courts freeze Stephen Hale's assets in New York, Zurich, Lisbon. Probe widens inside the Horizon Future Network. 4 former Silver Horizon execs subpoenaed. Each headline a small nail in a brand's coffin, a brand that had survived on applause. What remained were people. A single mother asking to transfer her kid because the scholarship vanished. Elders at a rest home sponsored by Silver Horizon receiving a notice of service cuts. Volunteers staring at the rubber wristbands on their arms. Kindness meets capital, unsure whether to take them off or keep them as scars. I spent most of my time apologizing, not because I caused the crime, but because I'd stayed quiet too long. With Maya, Rebecca, and Samuel, I went to places where Silver Horizon banners had once hung, a care center with a leaking roof, a makeshift classroom down to a few chalkboards, a food pantry gone bare. At each stop, I said the hardest thing. "I'm sorry I trusted the wrong man, but please, don't let your trust die with him. We'll make this right, with clean money and our own hands." Nights ran long in my small house. Emily moved in for a while. We ate chicken soup, simple and warm. She spoke less, but did the dishes every time. One night she pulled a wooden box, Margaret's box, off a shelf and set it in front of me. "I think it's time," she said. Inside, a clumsy hand-stitched handkerchief, a black and white photo, and a yellowed page. "Your mother's rules, written by hand. Every dollar must have a named recipient. Don't promise what you can't keep. The donor's name must be smaller than the beneficiary's." I read them, and my eyes burned. "Your mother left laws," I said, laughing sadly. "I left mistakes." Emily squeezed my hand. "You left the right decision, when it mattered. No one gets perfection. We just pray people turn in time." A week later, we registered a new nonprofit, the Silent Truth Foundation. We set up shop in St. Mary's basement, resin-scented beams, freckles of sunlight through a tiny window dotting the table. We started small, $47,380, crowd donations after the trial, and a symbolic restitution ordered for victims. On the whiteboard I wrote, "Goal 1, pay back 9,800 meals to care home numbered 12. Below it, Maya added, "Goal 2, restore spring scholarships for 30 students. Rebecca wrote, "Goal 3, pro bono legal aid for charity fraud victims." On day one, three elders hobbled in and handed me a wrinkled envelope. $47 and some change. We're not rich, one of them grinned, the gaps in her teeth shining, but we won't let anyone say our poverty makes evil's job easier. I cried, not for the money, but for the artery that had opened again. Trust, once revived, runs slow and stubborn like roots pushing through concrete. That evening, a letter arrived by courier. Federal prison postmark. From Stephen Hale. His handwriting was still sharp, but shaken. Mr. Ward, every night I hear the line, "Your silence is worth millions." I thought I was bargaining with the world. I was haggling with my conscience. If your silence then had been cheaper, maybe I'd still be out there. Because it was costly, I finally see the price. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only want you to know. I've heard the truth where an audience can't applaud. I folded the letter and tucked it into Margaret's box. Outside, winter wind spun dry leaves across the step. I stood in that clean cold for a long time, feeling, strangely, at peace. No one can give my time back, or Emily's, or the victims. But we can give time back to someone else. A hot meal, tuition paid on time, a lawyer who says no to dirty money. And so, from Silver Horizon's ash, we lit a smaller fire. Not spectacular, but steady. By his second month inside, Stephen began to lose his grip on time. Days ran by sound instead of calendar. The morning clank of keys, the heel slap of shoes in the hall, the 9 p.m., lights out siren. Each noise tapped at the past, the only thing he could no longer control. People who once called him Mr. Hale walked past him without a blink. Defense counsel pulled out. Former colleagues signed cooperation agreements. The CFO who used to toast with him at gala nights now testified against him. Even Emily, the one who'd believed the longest, stopped visiting. Stephen knew why. He'd turned her love into leverage, promises into shards of ambition. Understanding isn't the same as accepting. On night 118, he dreamed I stood outside the bars, saying nothing. No anger, no judgment, just quiet. "Say it," he screamed. "Curse me. Spit on me." But the image of me dissolved into the dark. A single sentence lingered. "You don't need me. You already sentenced yourself." He woke, drenched in cold sweat. In the heavy dark, he realized this was the second trial, the court of night, where there's no judge, only conscience and silence. The next day, he was assigned to the prison library. In a corner, he found a worn Bible. On the first page, a shaky hand had written, "For those who kept quiet in the face of evil." He read it for days. Each line carved into hard wood inside him. He started a journal, not for anyone else, but to serve his own sentence. Day 37. I count not the days I'm locked up, but the days I don't lie. Day 45. I miss being called by my name without a title. Day 62. Hell isn't where there's no light, it's where the light is there and you won't look. Outside, the world kept turning towards something better. The Silent Truth Foundation began to be known. TV producers called. I declined. "I don't want to talk more about the past," I said. "I want to make the present less wrong." Our first program launched, Back to Kindness, helping victims of financial scams rebuild. Maya led comms. Rebecca handled legal. Samuel advised on audits. One spring afternoon, I visited a re-entry center we funded. I met Lucas, 23, a former Silver Horizon junior staffer who'd nearly been charged for signing Stephen's name on a fake contract. He stood when I walked in, equal parts ashamed and afraid. "I hated you," he admitted. "I thought you destroyed the company and my job." "And now?" I asked. "Now I think you saved me. Without that trial, I'd still think hiding the truth was loyalty." He handed me a single page, an application to work at the Silent Truth. I signed without reading. "I need people who've been wrong," I told him. "They're the ones who truly understand why right matters." In the weeks that followed, Silent Truth grew. Law students volunteered. Small businesses chipped in. Lunch at St. Mary's got crowded and loud. I would sit in a corner listening to the laughter and feel a quiet warmth I'd thought I'd never touch again. That night, a second postcard arrived from federal prison. No message, only a verse, in the same trembling hand. "The truth shall set you free." No signature. I didn't need one. I placed it on a small shelf beneath Margaret's photo and whispered, "I hear you, Stephen." May you hear it too. Outside, the wind carried church bells, low and even, like the world's heartbeat healing itself. The next fall, a brief item appeared on the back page of the Washington Herald. Former businessman Stephen Hale, founder of Silver Horizon, transferred to the federal prison medical unit due to cardiac complications. Sources describe his health as deteriorating after more than a year served. No one followed up. No one cared to. Stephen faded from the map, as if his name had never glowed on billboards or basked in gala lights. Inside, he grew thin. The immortality in his eyes flickered out. On day 402, he collapsed in the yard. Before the guards took him, he clutched the old Bible he'd found and told a CO, "Don't lose this. Someone out there needs it." No one knew those were his last words. 4 days later, I received a letter from the prison administration. One stark line: Stephen Hale, deceased. No family claim. I read it over and over. I didn't cry. I only nodded, as if another verdict, life's verdict, had closed at its appointed hour. Emily watched me for a long time and asked, "Are you angry?" My voice sounded far away, like a bell in the hills. "No, anger's easy. Forgiveness takes strength, and all I want now is for that man to rest, even if it's in the dark." We claimed his ashes. No public gesture, no service. Just me, Emily, and Father Raymond carrying a small urn to the grass behind St. Mary's. The priest read softly, "A fallen one who bows may still find a way home." I opened the urn. The wind took him. The clouds gathered, then thinned. A month later, the Silent Truth Foundation held a memorial for Silver Horizon's victims. A small hall, no stage lights, a black and white wall of faces, people who'd lost money, lost trust, some who'd lost loved ones after betting their hope on a false charity. I stepped to the wooden lectern with a folded speech. I didn't read it at first. I looked out, Maya in the front row, a faint scar on her forehead, Rebecca quiet in back beside Samuel, steady on his cane, Emily near the door, eyes red but smiling warm. "A year ago," I began, "I thought I'd lost everything. My name, my family, my faith. Turns out sometimes God lets us fall, so we'll learn how to stand in the right direction." I took a breath. Silver Horizon is gone. That collapse isn't an ending. It's a foundation for something new, a truer trust. We've seen evil wear the costume of mercy. We've watched lies come dressed as charity. But today we've seen the opposite too. Goodness, even betrayed, can be rescued by one timely act. Faces old and young went still. I held up the paper. These are the first 57 people the Silent Truth Foundation has helped. A grandmother back in her home, a student back in school, a former employee in a new job. Proof that justice isn't an idea, it's a deed. Sunlight slanted through the window, tracing every line on my face, the lines truth left behind. I folded the page. I can't fix the past. I can guard the future from the next lie. And if anyone asks the most precious thing I got back after all this, I'll say, the trust of people who had every reason not to give it. Applause rose, deep, not loud, the sound of a community that had walked through hell and was finding its way back to the light. When it ended, Emily took my hand. "Dad, I think Mom would be proud." I looked at the amber sky. "Your mother taught me goodness doesn't need proof. It needs persistence." Outside, young volunteers hung a new sign, the Silent Truth Foundation, because truth should speak. The autumn wind lifted the fabric flag, two simple colors, white and blue, clean as a clear breath. I looked up. My eyes were quiet, bright. In my heart, Judge Eleanor Briggs's words returned, not a sentence now, but a promise. Justice isn't silent. It waits for the brave to speak. For the first time in years, I felt truly, simply at peace. When the prison door shut after his final medical transfer, Stephen Hale knew he would never see the outside world again. Gray walls, cold bars, lights that never went dark. Together they formed the permanent backdrop of his atonement. His body weakened, but his mind stayed brutally clear. The doctors warned his heart could stop at any moment, yet what scared him more was how perfectly his brain remembered the details of his crimes. He lay on the steel bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, where a hairline crack ran across like a stitch between two worlds. Every night he dreamed. In the dream he walked a corridor that never ended. Faces lined both sides, not angry, just empty, watching him. Some belonged to people he'd once shaken hands with. Some were children smiling from the staged charity photos, and at the far end stood Norman, holding Margaret's old notebook. When Stephen tried to move, his feet felt glued to the floor. "What do you want?" Norman asked, voice even, far away. "I want to be forgiven." "No one can forgive what you still won't face." Stephen woke with his pillow wet, every night the same. So he started to write, not to send, but to keep from losing his mind. The notebook was the prison library's lined paper. On the first page he scribbled a title, Journal of a Man Who Lied. He wrote in short lines, as if speaking to himself. Day 417. I once thought power made me immortal. Now I know it only stretches out the dying by minutes. Day 423. I miss Emily. Not because of love, but because of the look in her eyes when she finally saw me. There's no prison worse than that gaze. Day 439. I wish I could see Mr. Ward once, not to beg, but to say, I understand. Each night he read the pages like a verdict against himself. Some lines he scratched out, some blurred into stains, tears or sweat, even he couldn't tell. One day a small parcel arrived, no sender listed. Inside was an old photo, Stephen and Norman at the ribbon cutting of their first fund. Under it, in pencil, a father once believed in you. He stared for a long time, then cried, raw, rasping sobs from a man who once thought tears were for the weak and now found them rattling in the dark. After that, Stephen began writing letters. The first was to Norman, but it never left the prison. Norman, I know this may never reach you, but I need to write. I ruined everything, not just the money, but what you held as most beautiful in this world, trust. I thought I was clever enough to fool even God with staged goodness. Looking back, I see there was only one thing I ever did honestly. I envied you. I envied how people trusted you when you had nothing. I envied the way Emily looked at you when she said, Dad, something I could never earn. You said I knelt to money. I did, and it doesn't lift me up anymore. If I could trade all my years for a single day of peace, I would. But time can't be exchanged, only endured. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I only ask that if anyone asks about me, you don't call me a monster. Call me a man, because only people sin, and only people can ache for their sins. He tucked the letter into the old Bible and folded it closed. That night he dreamed he sat on the steps of St. Mary's. Norman came out with a cup of hot tea. Father, I'm home. You came sooner than I thought. Will I be forgiven? Norman smiled and shook his head. No one forgives. Only God does. Stephen woke, and for the first time in years felt still inside. Not because he'd been saved, but because he'd stopped running from his own guilt. The federal prison infirmary was so quiet you could hear the drip from a copper pipe. Stephen Hale lay there, thin as a shadow. Every breath was a brief negotiation between his heart and his guilt. The doctor said he had weeks, no visitors, no calls. The guards called him Mr. Charity, half mock, half pity. He didn't argue. He only nodded, managing a pale smile, grateful they at least used a name tied to a past, even if that past was counterfeit. On the bedside table, aside from medicine, sat a small notebook and a stub of pencil. He wrote his last lines, the letters shaky but clear. Day 457. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of dying before I can believe I was ever of use. Maybe a person's worth isn't in what they do when the world applauds, but in what they realize when no one is listening. He paused, glanced at the small window where a narrow band of sunlight slipped through. For the first time in months it didn't glare, it softened. As if God wasn't angry anymore, just waiting for him to say the last thing. Stephen asked for paper and wrote one more letter, this time to Norman and Emily. Later, a guard would say he folded it 3 times, sealed it with a strip of medical tape, and slid it under the old Bible. Norman, Emily, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to write. I once believed love was power, being admired, being named, being owned. Now I know love is the ability to look at someone's fault and still see they're worth saving. Norman, you did that for me, even when I didn't deserve it. I remember the first day at Hearthline. You shook my hand and said, Never let money walk ahead of trust. I laughed, thought it was an old man's slogan. Today I see I was a child who burned down his own house just to prove fire is hot. Emily, if you read this, don't remember me as the man who betrayed you, but as someone who finally learned what honesty means. I won't ask you to love me again. I only want you to know that in these last days, the thought of you was the one thing that made me want another morning. Norman, you once told me your silence might be worth millions, but one true word can save a life. I learned that too late. If remorse can count as a true word, then this is it. I'm not asking to be forgiven. I ask to be remembered, not as the source of harm, but as a warning to those about to cause it. Stephen Hale. He placed the letter beneath the Bible, looked up at the ceiling, and smiled, lightly, like a man setting down a weight. Sometime after midnight, the nurse on duty heard a soft sound, not a cry, but a long exhale. When they entered, Stephen lay still, eyes closed, one hand over his chest as if holding the final beat for someone else. 2 weeks later, a small package arrived at the Silent Truth Foundation. No sender. The label read, "From Federal Prison Medical Unit. Personal effects of deceased inmate Stephen Hale." Norman opened it. Inside, the worn Bible, a few loose pages, a sealed envelope. He sat with it for a long time before breaking the seal. Emily took his hand. When he reached the line, "I ask to be remembered." Tears spotted the paper. He folded the letter before finishing and turned to his daughter. "Do you want to read the rest?" "No, Dad. If that was his atonement, I think he already read it 100 times before he wrote it." They carried the letter to the garden behind St. Mary's. Afternoon light stretched over wet grass. Norman read a few final sentences aloud, then added a prayer. May Stephen's soul find rest, because in the end he heard the truth. He burned the letter. Ash lifted into the wind. Emily rested her head on his shoulder. Above them, the clouds parted just enough to leave a golden thread between two worlds, where regret stopped being a sentence and became an awakening. Norman looked up and spoke so only the wind could hear. "You're forgiven, Stephen. Not by me, by yourself." A year after Stephen's death, the Silent Truth Foundation had offices in 5 states. The name that began in St. Mary's basement now sat, modest but unshakable, on a wooden sign. Truth is never loud, it just lasts. Norman still traveled with Emily, not in a luxury car, but in a repainted white pickup with an open-hand logo on the door. They called it the Tour of Return, a road trip to give trust back. First stop, Franklin, once home to Silver Horizon's biggest branch. When Norman stepped onto the old block, people recognized him, but there were no jeers, no judgment. An elderly woman pressed an old photo into his hands. "Do you remember?" she asked, voice trembling. "They promised us a senior center, then vanished. Now, because of your foundation, we have a real place to live." Norman stared at the photo, eyes filling. Emily squeezed his hand and smiled. "See, Dad?" she whispered. "This is what justice looks like, found in quiet beds and safe roofs, not courtrooms." Everywhere they went, they left a small hand-carved plaque. This place was built with truth, not money. Maya, now the Foundation's head of communications, rode along, filming every visit, but never staging, never cutting around the rough edges. "The world has enough lies," she said. "Let them see what's real." In Georgia, a boy once pulled from a group home ran up and wrapped Norman in a hug. Through tears, he said, "I don't know who you are, but I know you helped people like me. I want to do what you do when I'm grown." Norman ruffled his hair and laughed softly. "Do better than me, kiddo. Be good before you get hurt. Don't wait for loss to teach you how to save." 6 months on the road. From lean southern counties to shuttered northern mill towns, the Silent Truth left simple things behind. A small library, a free classroom, a community legal desk. In every place, Norman jotted a line in his pocket notebook. "We can't fix the whole world, but we can teach it to stop lying." Back at St. Mary's, the church wore new paint. On the outer wall, someone had brushed a hand lifting a candle. Small light, big doorway. Father Raymond, hair more silver than before, nodded at the mural. "See, Norman? Light from the truth always finds a way out, if someone keeps it from going out." "I only keep it," Norman answered, palm on the fresh wall. "They, the ones who still believe, are the ones who light it." That night he sat on the church steps, moonlight spilling across a blank page. Emily brought 2 cups of tea. "Dad, we should go farther. The West has communities falling through the cracks." "You sure? That's a long road." "It's longer if we don't take it." He smiled, warmer than he had since Margaret passed. "Then we go." "As long as we carry kindness, not our reputation." The night wind drifted by with the clean scent of old pine, and the church bell carried that familiar sound of a new chapter beginning. Spring breathed them south. Sunlight swam over cotton fields. The highway shimmered with morning haze. The white truck rolled from town to town, each stop a story the world had left behind. In Memphis, they visited the little school whose roof they'd helped repair. A black teacher with hair like silver thread greeted them with a soft dawn smile. "Mr. Ward," she said, voice catching, "I once thought the world only made use of our goodness. Your foundation proved the opposite." She handed him a small wooden box. Inside lay a chalk stub, worn down to the nub. "This was my last piece of chalk before the school went dark. I'm giving it to you, so you remember. Small things last forever when they're written in faith." Norman held it, hands shaking. "Thank you, Pasquillo, for believing in what's real." They drove on to Louisiana, to a reentry center funded by the Silent Truth. A young man waited by the gate. Jerome, once a janitor at Silver Horizon, framed for theft. After the foundation helped clear his name, he went back to school and now trained others for work. "If it weren't for you, I'd still think I was the bad guy," he said, eyes wet. "You showed me a mistake isn't a period. It's a comma." "I didn't save you," Norman told him, clasping his hand. "I opened a door. You stepped through." Jerome grinned and offered a leather bracelet, rough carved from scrap wood. "Truth redeems." "We make these in the shop," he said. "Forgiveness. And a first step." Norman passed it to Emily. "Keep it. No justice is whole without mercy." They left Louisiana under a wind-heavy sky, bound for Franklin, the place where Stephen had once been held and where Norman had received the final letter. At the gate, a middle-aged officer introduced himself as Anderson. "Mr. Ward," he said, "by the late inmate's request, we've been holding something for you." He handed over a small, scarred oak box. Inside lay a silver fountain pen, its engraving faint. "To write truth, not legacy." Norman froze. It was the pen he'd given Stephen on Silver Horizon's first night, a gift he'd forgotten, now back in his palm like a circle closing. "He said," Anderson added, "if you ever came, to tell you he used that pen to write the last part of his life, in truth." Norman tipped his face to the reddening sky. Light fell through the bars and struck the pen in his hand, flaring like a small flame, no longer burning, but warm. Emily laced her fingers with his. Maybe that's what he wanted to send. Not penance, but thank you. "No," Norman whispered. "It's God's way of saying forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering without the pain." They drove off in silence. On the seat beside him, the pen rested with the chalk and the wooden band. 3 small things, 3 emblems: atonement, truth, and mercy. And Norman knew that when they returned to St. Mary's, he'd use that pen to write the last speech of his life. That autumn, St. Mary's reopened after nearly 3 years. On the altar table lay 3 simple objects: a white chalk nub, a wooden bracelet, a silver pen, symbols of atonement and real justice. Norman stepped to the lectern, hair bright as frost in the late gold light. The hall was full, people the foundation had helped, volunteers, students, and those who only knew him from headlines long ago. No cameras, no press, just people, and a silence wide enough to hear each breath. He looked around and spoke, slow and warm. "I've spent most of a lifetime learning a simple thing. Justice isn't punishment. It's the truth spoken in time, so others don't have to be hurt the way we were." He raised the chalk. "This wrote our first lessons. And today it reminds us knowledge matters only when written with a true heart." He held up the wooden band. "This was carved by a man once condemned, who taught me forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't erase the wrong. It unloads the heart." Finally, he lifted the silver pen. Light flashed across the metal like a passing star. "This signed lies once, and then wrote the truth. Tools aren't guilty. Only the hands choosing how to use them." The room held still. Norman paused, then continued, voice a little unsteady but sure. "I lost everything, my name, my daughter, my faith in people. And then I learned family isn't blood, it's respect and love, the ones who stand with you in a storm, not because they must, but because they choose to." In the front row, Emily cried openly. Maya squeezed Rebecca's hand. Samuel bowed his head in prayer. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, laying a soft blaze across Norman's shoulders. He spoke the last lines without notes and without looking down, eyes on the crucifix above. "If you're carrying a grudge, a wound, a truth you're afraid to speak, say it. Justice doesn't need a crowd. Only one voice brave enough to face its fear, and when you speak, truth turns into light for someone else's road. He set the pen on the wood. The tiny tap rang like a coda. Emily stood and wrapped her arms around him. Dad, I'm proud to carry your name. No, sweetheart. I'm the proud one, because you still call me Dad. Silence broke into applause, deep, steady, and full. Outside, the sky burned orange, hugging St. Mary's bell tower as three warm, long peals rolled across the evening. Norman whispered, a benediction for the whole journey. At last, the truth was spoken. And this time, it doesn't hurt. He looked out at the faces listening with their hearts and offered one final promise. If you're reading, listening, or just paused long enough to hear this, remember, justice isn't the court's job alone. It's yours and mine. Keep following, because wherever there's darkness, truth is waiting for a voice. Family isn't blood, it's respect and love.